Hello, thanks for watching this Wednesday, November 22nd West Weather Update brought to you by Nutrien Solutions. To start here, we're looking at the western U.S. This is a visible satellite imagery. And I want to just point your attention to the cloud field here, streaming really across Oregon, parts of northern Idaho, into Montana. And what you're seeing kind of this cloud shield here, you can see it moving from the west toward the east. That is really kind of a reflection of the jet stream, which is coming onshore across the northwestern U.S. right now, bringing those clouds along with it, and a little bit of inclement weather to talk about here for the Thanksgiving holiday break. First things first, I wanted to show you the radar imagery. This is across the northwest, same view that I was just showing you here. Some light showers moving through. If I jump back here, moving through parts of southern Oregon. We actually have some light rain now just passing through Ontario, Oregon here. This was filmed here about 2 p.m. Pacific time, so that's going to start moving into the Boise area pretty soon, potentially after this video is updated and recorded. But you can see something of a low pressure system starting to get going here across the interior west. You can see the rain showers associated with that. That's kind of the weather story we're watching, at least over the next 24 hours, and that has implications, I think, for the Snake River Valley in Idaho. To kind of show you that, we'll jump over here. This is the ECMWF, the European model forecast. We'll look at the precipitation forecast here, just going through kind of the Thanksgiving, let's call it the Thanksgiving weekend here. This is the current picture here. I'll make this valid here as of Wednesday afternoon when the filming of this video is occurring. You can see this lines up pretty well with the radar imagery we just looked at earlier. So well done here from the ECMWF. We see that light rain moving through southern Oregon, those rain showers here moving through the Treasure Valley, parts of the middle Snake River here, potentially some rain showers getting into the Boise, Idaho area. So take this forecast forward. This is through Wednesday evening, now into early Thursday morning on Thanksgiving. And we can see the upper Snake River Valley starting to get into some of that light snow. So as this low pressure system kind of takes shape here over the interior west, expecting some light snow into the Snake River Valley, particularly areas east and that upper Snake River Valley area. Nothing too substantial here. Forecast amounts, at least for the valley itself, aren't too extreme here, looking at anywhere from 1 to 2, 1 to 3. Can't rule out 4 inches in some of the upper portions here, where some of that snowfall, at least here from this ECMWF forecast, expected to stick around possibly, through Thursday night into the overnight into early Friday as well, clearing out into Utah, Colorado, parts of Wyoming quickly after that. And that pretty much clears us out of precip for the western region here for the rest of the holiday break here, this valid now, as of getting close to midday or early morning Saturday, I should say. Now, if we look at some of those snowfall totals, this again from the ECMWF, you can see some higher values here in the higher elevations in far southern Idaho near that Nevada-Utah state line here. But some of these amounts here, again, in the actual valley itself, looking anywhere, from an inch, maybe up to 4 inches in the far eastern portions of the valley, at least for Idaho specifically. Not too much falling elsewhere in our immediate western region. The bigger story, I think, for some other folks here across the western U.S., and I did want to get this in here before Thanksgiving, I think could be the temperatures associated with this system moving through. So what we're looking at here, this is the National Weather Service, the NDFD overnight low temperature forecast. We're concerned about that, of course. We want to get an idea of how low are those temperatures going to get overnight here into Thursday morning, Thanksgiving morning here on the 23rd. And keep an eye here on the Central Valley of California. Overnight lows tonight going into Thursday morning expected to be in the 40s, not terribly too concerning. Willamette Valley in the mid-30s here, can't rule out a frost. But as you take this forecast forward, those temperatures are plummeting. Look in the Golden Triangle of Montana, down into the teens, cooling off in Idaho, eastern Washington, eastern Oregon, starting to drop in the Central Valley as well. This is Friday morning now, so the Willamette Valley likely into freezing territory Friday morning, with that snowpack moving in across the Snake River Valley, expecting temperatures to drop further here on Saturday morning. And now we're getting into those mid to upper 30s in the Central Valley of California, all the way here in the San Joaquin Valley now, 34-degree Fahrenheit overnight low, going into Saturday morning, potentially for the Fresno area, South, Visalia, Porterville, etc. Taking that forecast into early Sunday morning, now we're talking about bona fide freezing chances across the San Joaquin Valley, throughout the Central Valley there. Can't rule out something even in the Sacramento Valley as well, with temperatures now forecast to be in the mid-30s on early Sunday morning. Willamette Valley, now at this point, well under freezing, talking about something in the high 20s here as far as those overnight lows. And Idaho plummeting all the way down into potential single digits for the upper Snake River Valley, down into the teens or at least the low 20s for parts of the middle Snake, Boise, Treasure Valley, Ontario, Oregon area there, and far eastern Oregon. These low temperatures stick around Monday night as well. I think if we're looking specifically at the San Joaquin Valley, your best chances And best seems to be the wrong qualitative word here, but your best chances for those serious freezing temperatures would likely be Sunday morning or Monday morning. Can't rule out something Saturday morning, but I think those temperatures will be colder when we wake up Sunday morning versus Saturday morning, particularly for that Fresno area and south of there as well. And if we jump to Tuesday, if you were to compare it to the last 2 days, we're still very cold. We're talking 30s in the Willamette Valley, potentially teens across the Snake River Valley, low 20s in the Golden Triangle of Montana, but still looking at those low 30s across the Central Valley, but warmer than we saw in some of those mornings over the weekend. So expecting a warm up going into next week, but certainly Saturday morning, Monday morning, Tuesday morning, we're going to be talking about frost and freeze across much of the western U.S. and those cold temperatures dropping all the way down into the lower Colorado River Valley, albeit not talking about a freeze here. If I want to look over, let's take a closer look here at the Central Valley of California here. I'll take this back to Sunday night where you can see 32 degree Fahrenheit forecasted. Fresno, South Porterville, Visalia, a number of these areas, almost all the way through Bakersfield, at least areas to the northwest of that. So we're going to be watching a wide area that I think we're going to be looking at frost advisories. We're going to be looking at likely freeze watches and potentially some freeze warnings. This is, a 3 to 4 day forecast at this point, and it is, that level of freezing is one temperature. It's 30 degrees Fahrenheit, so whether it's above that or below, that determines quite a bit in terms of that forecast. So it's possible that this trends, in a warmer direction, and we don't get into those freeze warnings. That's kind of the hope here. It's also possible it trends just a little bit cooler here, and we're talking about a more widespread freeze event across the Central Valley. So this is something to watch for as we go through really the end of the holiday weekend here. If we jump over and look at the national blend of models, slightly different product, and I made this valid here Monday morning. Still seeing agreement here in some of those cold freezing temperatures across the Central Valley, talking 30, 31, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Certainly a possibility looking here at this MBM model for the Central Valley. So a number of different models now cluing in on some of these cold temperatures that we'll have to watch for. Want to take a look at the upper level height pattern to get an idea where we might be going beyond that cold weather here. This is looking at a 5-day rolling anomaly of those upper level heights. So looking at the kind of red contours on this map where we have ridges or warm temperature, where you kind of see those blue purple colors where we have troughs, which tend to bring in more inclement weather, cooler weather, cold fronts, potentially some precipitation as well. And if we look at that 5-day average over Friday through this weekend, and I'll make this over 5 days here. If we look at that through the weekend here, we can see lower heights here across California, Nevada, Arizona. That's coincident with those colder temperatures we're seeing across the interior west and parts of the Central Valley of California. That sticks around through early next week, but a little bit of a warm up here going into the work week next week for the northwestern U.S., parts of California, parts of Idaho and Montana, certainly compared to, I think, where we'll be at the kind of beginning and end of this holiday break here. But as we go out beyond that, we're seeing this shift into early December where the models have flipped back a bit cooler here, potentially wetter. Might be the bigger story here for the western coast, potentially California, Oregon, can't rule out Washington, Nevada, Arizona as well, with this trough setting up just west of that western U.S. coastline. When we get these troughs set up just to the west of us, they help to funnel in some precipitation. This forecast here is from the ECMWF ensemble model. You can see that trough starting to set up here across the western coast. This is really kind of a 10-day forecast at this point, so don't have a ton of confidence in this right now. Just kind of curiously, here's the European model. If we jump over and look at the American model, the GFS, the Global Forecasting System, and its ensemble run, so we're running a number of these different models, averaging them out and looking at where that trough position is over that same time period, that day 6 through 11. Again, essentially a 10-day forecast. But we see very similar trough position with these height anomalies here, these blue colors here off the coast of California. When these models tend to agree like this, that gives us a little bit more confidence that they might be cluing into a signal here rather than noise. And that's making us lean a little bit wetter with that precipitation forecast, maybe a little bit cooler for parts of the western U.S. as we go into early December. There's been some what I'll call flip-flopping here in the models, some of them suggesting not terribly long ago that we might be seeing more of a warmer spell as we got into early December. Now those flipping back toward colder. I think there's some uncertainty here as to what that dominant pattern is going to be as we go into early December. Something we've looked at in the past here is the Madden-Julian oscillation. That's the MJO. I mentioned, I think a week ago, if not 2 weeks ago, that as long as this Madden-Julian oscillation stayed going through the Indian Ocean, not over in the Western Hemisphere, potentially over Indonesia, that would likely give us a warmer and drier break across the West. Obviously, we've had some precipitation events and some cold fronts to talk about over the last few weeks. And we're seeing some of that here. That forecast you can see trying to move through the Indian Ocean But some of the latest forecasts here, this one from the ECMWF that came out here today on the 22nd, have us going back into what we'll call null space, this inner circle here, potentially advertising a return to the MJO toward the Pacific Ocean, which would not be uncommon given that El Nino background state. El Nino, warmer waters in the equatorial Pacific, that can help spark some convection there, which is part of that MJO global circulation. So if we see kind of a flip back toward the Pacific here, rather than this long drawn out MJO march through parts of the Eastern Hemisphere, that could very well put us back into a colder or maybe even a wetter pattern here in early December like the models are suggesting. So we're seeing some waffling from the models here, some lower confidence in what we'll see in early December, but at least right now the trend is back toward more inclement and I would say cooler, maybe even wetter weather here. I think we can see that looking at the extended forecast from the ECMWF. This is a 30-day forecast valid, essentially going all the way through the month of December here. And the story, at least looking at this model specifically, is cooler across the western region, particularly the interior west here, but potentially for California as well. So this is kind of an agreement with where this forecast was, a week or two ago. It switched back a little bit more moderate, a little bit more seasonal for the western U.S. That had us thinking, well, maybe this is a little bit of a warmer trend. Quickly switched back toward this cooler pattern that we saw through much of November, at least in the earlier part of the month, in terms of that forecast for December specifically. Look at the climate prediction here, the CPC for another opinion. I want to clue in the 8 to 14 day outlook here, particularly for precipitation. This is really looking in that time frame where there was some lower confidence in that forecast, but there was agreement from the ECMWF and the GFS. If you remember that picture of that trough situated just off the west coast, and that's a pretty strong precipitation signal for that area, for California, Oregon, Washington, and potentially the wider western region. So that's the forecast right now that we're keeping an eye on. There is some uncertainty there, just which way the MJO is going to go, if it's going to stay further out into the Eastern Hemisphere through the Indian Ocean and Indonesia, or if it's going to try to jump back quickly back into the Pacific, where we could see these troughs again moving across the western U.S., talking precipitation or an atmospheric river event, maybe say December 3rd. So that's kind of the fork in the road, and we'll keep an eye on where we're going forward from there. One thing I did want to mention, we do have this El Nino state background that's continuing to strengthen. And something we see typically with El Nino years is Hawaii struggling with some drought concerns. That's certainly been the case this year. Some of that El Nino drought correlation typically takes place more in that kind of proper wet season for Hawaii, maybe in the early part of the new year here, 2024 would be that. We've seen it really kind of build in here recently, but there is some precipitation, I think, in the forecast, at least some precipitation chances here to keep an eye on. We're looking at that upper level height pattern. I showed you this earlier from the ECMWF, but I wanted to clue in just on Hawaii here, which is right in the middle of the screen. If I take this forecast, I'll make it valid here as of Wednesday evening. Not too much to look at here this week, little upper level low well to the west of the state here through the weekend, likely not close enough to affect anything too much. As we get to November 28th, essentially almost a week from now, see these upper level height anomalies in the negative direction here. This is one of those kind of subtropical Kona lows that we watch for during the winter season to bring precipitation, to bring those rain chances to the island of Hawaii. Now the placement of these, can be important. If this shifts more to the west, it might miss out on some of the islands here for precipitation. If it parks itself just west of the islands or over the islands, you bring those cold front through, you bring the precipitation, that agitation in the atmosphere to help get precipitation across much of these islands, which are looking ahead at potentially some drought concerns going through their wet season. So not necessarily a bad thing if they get some water out of this. And we're looking at that midweek, next week, after the holiday break. If we look at those 5-day precipitation anomalies going through kind of the next work week, see some of these high values here for the western islands, including some of the islands here in the east, say for the leeward side of the Big Island. So the placement of these Kona lows is important. If it shifts more to the west in some of these forecasts as they come through this weekend, I think that would bring that down, these precipitation amounts. It could very well just as easily shift east and bring some of these amounts up. I think the big picture story here is watching for precipitation chances to pick up mid next week for Hawaii, and that water potentially could be needed if they're looking at a more long-term background drought risk there. Otherwise, since the last time we talked, we did get new monthly temperature outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center. As far as the western U.S. is concerned, not surprised to see the CPC going more seasonal across the western U.S. for December specifically. We saw the models kind of jumping back and forth, whether they wanted to stick with that cooler pattern, whether they were going to shift warmer. I think based on some of the latest model day updates just over the last few weeks here, I would lean a little bit cooler and a little bit wetter than this. There is some uncertainty here. forecasting out an entire month is certainly an exact science. The model's flipping back toward that, seeing some historical precedents in these El Nino years for cooler Decembers has me leaning in that direction right now. We did also get an updated 3-month or seasonal outlook for winter across the western U.S. What we see here is a pretty typical El Nino pattern still here. So we're not looking, at least from the Climate Prediction Center, as a kind of a whiff on California precipitation for this El Nino, seeing those above average precipitation anomalies here for California, Nevada, perhaps even parts of Oregon and the lower Colorado River Valley. And that's overlapping here with some warmth here across the Pacific Northwest. We see some correlation between that and historical El Ninos and potentially some drier risks across Montana. So that's where we're looking at the seasonal forecast right now. As far as that's concerned, that's all I have for you guys for this holiday update here. Enjoy the weekend, and I'll talk to you all next week.